So when I'm angry, I still need to feel and experience that anger so that I can get down to the next part of it.
Certainly.
But I also need to be loving, kind, compassionate and understanding
of yourself,
of myself, that I need to go through this so that I can become a better person and open myself up more to God.
Yes. It doesn't mean to dump it on everybody else, but understand that every time you're angry, which is already in a way a dumping on other people anyway, so you're already doing it, we need to understand that God feels these things, and eventually we will actually feel the same way about ourselves as God feels about our anger. So you know how many people in different religious denominations around the earth, whether they be Christian or not, they all have this idea that God punishes you for certain actions. That's because they don't feel God. It's because they think of God, and they think that that's what God must be. Because if they felt God, if they actually could feel God's emotions for them, they would realise that in that moment they don't feel anger or disappointment or disapproval or withdrawal of love from God. They only feel things about themselves. You'd be able to tell the difference between those two states. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think I am still very angry. When you said earlier about all the religions that have led us away from the way of God, I feel very angry with God because, you know, I've had all these teachings from everybody else, and to me it's like this God's way didn't work, and I'm being punished for all the sins of the past generations.
But can you see then how your anger with God is almost illogical? While it's something you need to feel, it is almost illogical in the sense that God never created these other ways. Man did. Man wanted to create man's definition of God. And so man, in his arrogance, decided he'd come up with one way. Let's call it science, or let's call it evolution, or let's call it atheism, or let's call it Christianity, or let's call it, you know, the Muslim faith, or let's call it Hindu or Buddhist, or let's call it, you know, anything that you can think of that man can pursue, right down to tantric sex as a god. You know, like all sorts of things man creates as a god. And they are all man's way, thinking it's man's way to God. Many of them do believe they are man's way to God. In the case of some of them, like atheism, they don't believe there's a God, so that even takes the whole expression a little further. But it's still the same kind of thing in the sense that it's still a belief system that prevents them from fully embracing themselves and fully embracing their Creator. And what we finish up doing with that definition is we create one, and then because we became, like, when I say we, the people who were the leaders of those defining moments decided in their own arrogance that their way was the best way. And in that place, what they decided to do was set up a whole following of that particular way. And this is where literally thousands and thousands of religions got created, by having a following after a person who created a way that he believed was the right way. And of course, he had a whole condition emotionally that caused him to believe that was the right way, which then attracted other people who had the same emotional conditions to believe him. And that's how error, in terms of truth and error, divine truth and error, arrived on the planet. It wasn't God's creation, but rather man's desire to create for himself.
So I'm really angry at the people who went before and changed everything.
Yes.
I'm not really angry at God.
Well, you're unwilling to be angry at the people, and you'd like to blame God for their actions.
Because he's my father figure? Because my father caused some...
No, because you don't want to feel the grief of being told lies most of your life. Do you see? The only reason why we get angry with God is because we don't want to feel the grief of being told lies about God and about other things, about our life, all of our life up to the point that we learn the truth. And God doesn't deserve the rage of that. Who deserves the rage of that is the people who created the untruth. You know, and who deserves, well, like, we have grief as a result of that untruth, and we need to be humble enough to experience that grief. Yeah? That's the creation. Jen, thanks.